Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mr. Productivity Podcast. Hey, have you gone to MrProductivity.com yet and signed up for my free email newsletter? If not, go do it right now. I got a great guest for you, Dr. Danny Brassell, but he told me I can call him Danny throughout the show. We are going to have a great conversation because his LinkedIn profile says, engage audiences, inspire action, and elevate impact. We also have a tremendous love of reading. We're going to get into all that. But Danny,
thanks
welcome
so
to the
much
show.
for having me, Mark, and more importantly, thanks for being a shining light in a darkening world.
Well, that's because I have a bald head and all the sunlight reflecting off my chrome dome.
Right.
So let's talk about, first of all, our love for reading. So a little inside podcasting for the audience as I do these pre-interview calls for my guests. And one of the things we were talking about is we both love reading. And I don't have enough time to read. I have a non-negotiable reading at least 1 hour every day. I like to read more than that, but I really should be working on my business because I have not found a job, Danny, where they'll pay me like $1 to $2 million a year where I could just read all day. So I have to do my job. So what did you do? How many hours do you like to read a day? 24,
No,
20?
Gosh, I don't know, actually. Maybe a couple of hours a day. I always start off the day reading. I end the day reading, and I usually do a little bit in between, and I'll read when I'm on the bike, and I'll listen to podcasts and to audiobooks when I'm in the car. I've actually never added it up just for me, but a lot. But it's like you and I talked about. I mean, because of you, I started reading Cal Newport's books, and one book that I read that changed my life was Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And there was a line in that book that changed my life, and it refers to you as Mr. Productivity because he said, in Greek, the word priority can only be used in the singular. And ever since then, I give myself one priority a day. And when people tell me, oh, I have no time to read, I'm like, yeah, who has time to read after you watch the game on TV, have a couple of beers, go out shopping? I mean, who has time? I mean, life is all about priorities. It's what you do with it. You know this better than anybody.
100%. When people tell me I don't have time, I say what you just said. I say, you lack priorities, not time, because we all have the same amount of time. Now, I do not spend time scrolling on social media, very rarely, maybe 10 minutes a day. I use social media. I don't let social media use me. But I don't want people to think that I am so like I'm Mr. Productivity 24/7, 365. My favorite sport is football. In America, it's called soccer, but in the rest of the world, they call it football. And I schedule my days around that. Like right now, we're recording this, and there's a Euro 2024 tournament game on right now, which is being recorded, and I'll watch it later. So there is okay to spend time on social media or watching your favorite TV show or playing video games, but I want the audience to think, is that making you money? Are you getting paid to do that? Now, if you are getting paid to do that, that's not what we're talking about. If someone really is paying you to scroll endlessly on TikTok all day or Meta or YouTube, good for you. But for the rest of us, we have to actually have a job. So I will tell you this, that I heard a quote about a year ago or 2 years ago from Robin Sharma, one of my favorite authors. And he said this, instead of reading 52 books a year, why not study 10 or 15 of them? That really hit me because I was one of these guys where I was rushing through a book just to put it on my little list to get to the next book. And I wasn't stopping to absorb all the information. Now, you probably don't ever do that. You probably have studied books for a long time. So you're like better than I am. But let's talk about the difference between studying a book and reading a book.
I mean, you can read for pleasure or you can read for information. I mean, you and I both like nonfiction. We like marketing books. We like, I love Robin Sharma too. His parables are fantastic. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is a wonderful book. I think it's good to do a deep dive into certain books. I mean, there's a book that I read every year called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, which is absolutely fantastic. The thing is completely worn down because I've read it so many times. It's highlighted, written in the margins because I'm using it. I put it into, when I'm working with, I work with entrepreneurs and executives and business owners on how to craft engaging presentations. And one of the things I'm helping them on is how to create a more compelling offer to their audience, whether it's to purchase their product or to donate to their cause. Or last week I was working with a law firm showing all the lawyers, well, here's how you can convince the jury to get on your side. And Cialdini does a great job of showing ethical marketing strategies. And I think everybody should read that book.
Well, that book is on my bookshelf and I've never read it. So now you've just convicted me to put yet another book on my book queue. So how many books are you actively reading right now? And I mean fiction, any spiritual books, marketing books, business books. At this moment in time, we're recording this on June 24th. How many books are you actively reading right now?
7 to 10. I always have.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I have to explain that, so one of the things, I have 3 kids and a wife. And so we do book dates. And so each of my kids has, So I'll read, my oldest daughter, she likes Game of Thrones. And so we're reading Fire and Ice by George R.R. Martin. I'm not exactly a fan of some of the language and situations, but it turns her on. So that's fine. My son, he loves everything military. And so we've been reading actually Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien, which we love the movie. And I'm like, wow. The movie is nothing like the book. The book is very different. And the book, I realize how inadequate I am as a human being because I have to get out my dictionary about 7 times per page. And then my youngest daughter, for some reason, she likes literature. And so we're reading The Great Gatsby, which drives me crazy. I hate that book. But the more I read it, I'm like, okay, well, F. Scott Fitzgerald, he knew how to craft a sentence. And then my wife... we are reading this really cool series of books called The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. And I never would have thought that I would enjoy like an Elizabethan period novel with a woman and 3 guys. And I love it. It's actually, there's 7 books so far in the series, and I'm really enjoying it. And then for me, I read all kinds of nonfiction. So I'm reading, I'm almost done with Dick Ebersol's autobiography. He created Saturday Night Live and was the director of NBC Sports for years. I'm reading Walter Isaacson's biography on Einstein. And then I'm also reading The Drifters by James Michener because I'm off to Europe in a couple of days. And James Michener. It seemed like something to read. It's thick and it's portable.
Wow.
Anything else I'm reading? And then I like to, actually, this is a good strategy for everybody watching. I'm not that bright. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. And so before I go to parties, I'll go to either Barnes & Noble to the children's section or to the public library to the children's section. And I'll get about 10 of these 32-page picture biographies of famous people. And so then I can drop interesting tidbits during did you know Elon Musk, so you don't have to read, just because a book's big doesn't mean it's important. Sometimes you can read some of those picture books and you can get all the information you need. So that's, I guess that sounds impressive that I read that. I always tell people that books are television for intelligent people.
Well, you got me beat, sir, because I am reading, with my cousin, we are reading through the New Living Translation from Genesis Revelation. My wife and I have started reading the New Testament in the CSB. Then I read the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Then I'm almost finished reading Outlive. I listened to the audiobook, but now I'm reading through the hardcover book. Then I'm reading a book I was recommend. I can't think of the title. It's about managing your day-to-day thing. It's from 2011. I'm finally gotten around to reading Atlas Shrugged. I mean, I had put this book off for so long. I finally started reading that. And there's one other, I can't think of another book I'm reading. I just lost my head. I just lost I think that may be it. That may be it. I think it's 5 books. So I think reading is so important. And I think so many people, they are spending so much time on their phones and so much time playing video games. And first of all, it's usually violent or vulgar. And think about what that's doing to your brain. And I just think you need to take the time to sit down and read a book. Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson was a great book. I haven't read Einstein. That's another book on my Kindle I'm going to read. Robert Sharma put it this way: you should have more books in your library than you can ever get around to. And I love that because there's no way. I'm 59 now. It's not that I can't get through the books I have now. It's that I keep adding books like you recommended, Robert Cialdini's book. How do you say his name? Robert?
Yeah.
Cialdini. I have had that book for 4 years. Now that's going on my pile. So I've got a pile of books that are print books and a pile of books on my Kindle and a pile of books on my Audible. So I just, when I run every day, I'm listening to an audiobook. Area 51 by Anne, can't think of her name. She wrote the book, a best-selling book, Nuclear War. And I'm listening to all her books in audiobook. It's just, I agree with you. Jim Rohn said, poor people have big televisions, rich people have big libraries. And that quote always stuck in my head. So, all right, let's move on to the what is it, 6 words that are on your LinkedIn page. Engage audiences, inspire action, and elevate impact. What is that all about? Break that down for us.
What is it all about? Well, one of the things I do, so communication skills are what I do. So I always tell people, well, in terms of speaking, I speak over 100 dates a year all over the world. Actually, this has been my week of bees. I was in Beaumont, Texas, then Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm off to Barcelona next. In terms of reading, I've got the world's top reading engagement program online, which in just over 2 months shows parents how to get their kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. Because I find schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, well, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. I've never had to tell a kid, go read. I want them to choose to do it because they love it. I don't know if you're like me, but, I was watching the soccer yesterday. I was watching Copa America and the Euro Cup, and I read a book during the games. So I read, what was the book called? It's about, A Matter of Death and Life. It's by this couple. They were both professors at Stanford and they're both dying. And it's about their experiences dying. It's very sad.
Wow. I just want to interject here real quick that I was watching a video on YouTube from Patrick Bet-David. And what he does with his kids, I've never heard this before. If they want something, the currency is pages. So he says, I want this. He goes, okay, that's going to be it's going to be like 85 pages. So that's how he gets his kids to read. Is everything doesn't cost money, it costs pages, because he wants to encourage his kids to read. And when I heard that, I'm like, wow, my girls are 30 and 26. I wish I would have thought about that when they were young.
That's one of the strategies I share with parents all the time. My own 3 children, I have a feeling that television is here to stay, and I don't believe in resisting technology. I believe in embracing technology. And so I made the habit when the kids were very young is they can turn on the TV, but the price of admission is a book. And so when they were little, they'd bring me children's picture books and we'd read that before they turned on the TV. Now they're in their 20s and their youngest is a teenager. And so they'll usually bring me their iPad and we'll read together some article online from something. So I love that he does that. What I say? So I'm speaking, I'm reading, and then writing, I've written 17 books. Number 17 just came out. And then in terms of listening, I work with, entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners on how to create well-crafted presentations that get their audience to take the next step. When one of the things, even with the law firm last week, I was saying, basically there's 3 motivations that all human beings have, one or all 3 of. Everybody wants to make more income. Everybody wants to have more freedom, and everybody wants to have more impact. If I want to be stereotypical, usually when you're in your 20s, you're concerned about income. When you're in your 40s, you're concerned about your freedom. And when you're in your 60s, you're concerned about your impact. And so we're trying to weave those different motivations throughout a presentation. And what I'm helping them do is create what I call a stump speech. I've heard some people call it a signature talk. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't matter what you call it, but this is the presentation that introduces you to the world, whether you're speaking to one person or 1,000 people, that introduces you to that audience. And so that's what I'm doing all the time and I there's simple ways, Jim, you had mentioned Jim Rohn was one of my mentors, and Jim, he's wonderful. I completely agree with him. Poor people have big TVs, rich people have big libraries. I always tell people there's two ways you get better at speaking. First of all, you have to watch lots of speakers. And so I watch 10 speakers a day. I mean, I watch them in front of big audiences, in front of small audiences, in front of international audiences, in front of American audiences, in front of men, in front of women. Here's a ninja strategy I share with people when I'm coaching them. I watch a lot of award shows because when the person wins when the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with their audience. Now, most people just waste their time. They're like, I want to thank God. I want to thank, the Academy. It's stupid. Nobody pays attention. But every now and then a person does a great job. So a couple of years ago, there was a gentleman, his name was Joe Walker. He won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Well, this is an audience of the important people in Hollywood, actors. They don't care about film editing. So they show the audience, nobody's paying attention. And he gets up there and he's British and he speaks very deliberately. He says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. And now the camera's showing the audience, and you see people kind of leaning in, interested in what's he going to say. And he says, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. And all of a sudden you see everybody laughing hysterically. Mark, he gets off stage. I see Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Time magazine said it was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards. That's the power of connecting very quickly with an audience. So the first step to becoming a better speaker is you got to watch lots of speakers. The second step, Jim used to always tell me, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. And so I typically work with people for 2 days, and I always say, hey, I want you going on podcast. I want you, even the smallest communities in the world have Optimist Club, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, Rotary Club, speak to schools, speak to synagogues, speak to churches, speak to Chamber of Commerce. And so one of my success stories I love to talk about, not this past January, but the January before, I worked with this gentleman named Gustavo. Now, Gustavo should be president of the United States. I love Gustavo. So he came to America from Ecuador, didn't speak a word of English, did every menial job possible, and invested every dime into real estate. 30 years later, the guy's worth about $30 million. And so we were crafting his offer, and he has a 4-month coaching program in real estate for $40,000. Well, Mark, that's a high ticket offer. I'm like, wow, that's a steep tip.
Kinda.
I said, hey, Gustavo, we got to get you practicing this. And he's like, well, I'm going on a podcast tonight. I'm like, here's my phone number. Call me tomorrow. I want you to tell me that you were on the podcast and you made the offer. He's like, okay, sure. So I get a call from him the next day. He's like, Danny, you are a genius. I'm like, did you go on the podcast, Gustavo? He's like, yes. Did you make the offer? Yes. I'm like, did anybody buy it? He's like, 23. Mark.
Wow.
Math isn't my thing. Reading's my thing. But if I'm doing my math correctly, he made $920,000 that evening on an offer we had crafted that afternoon. And I was so delighted. And we've been in touch since then. This is almost a year later. He's made 8 figures off of this speech that we put together. And the reason I get, oh, and by the way, audience, your results may vary. But what I love is he actually did it. Most people never do anything.
Wow.
You know this. You're Mr. Productivity. There's all kinds of people. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to. I hate that phrase. I'm gonna. No, you ain't.
Yep. No. Well, a couple things I want to. First of all, I really love that British accent. You nailed it. I mean, I'm just like, man, that is pretty cool. Are you from Britain? Are you from Britain and speaking American? Or are you from American? Anyway, so let me tell you about my story about speaking. So there was a time before the nonsense the last 3 years where I was in National Speakers Association Houston chapter, and I would faithfully go to the meetings every single month. And I remember sitting there one day, somebody's out there telling you how you should be a better speaker. And I remember having this thought. I said, you should know your topic so well that you could be at a conference and the meeting planner comes out and says, the speaker got abducted by alien. Who can come up and give us keynote without any preparation, without your slides or anything? You should be in your Hawaiian shirt, your shorts, and your flip-flops. And I shared that with some people there, and they're like, oh, no, you should never be able to do that. That's just rubbish, as they say over in England. Well, a couple months later, I'm listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, and he says, you should know your topic so well, you should be able to give a decent keynote without any preparation. And that kind of validated it, because if you need 6 months to create a presentation, now correct me if I'm wrong, because this is your area of expertise. You probably don't know your stuff that well. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't prepare. I'm saying that if you need 6 months to prepare a speech, do you really know your stuff that well? Do you agree with me or not?
To some extent, I agree with you. I mean, I definitely think you need to prepare. I mean, Steve Jobs, everybody's like, oh, he was a great presenter. People don't look at the fact that he prepared for months before he ever gave any presentation. I mean, I like what Kobe Bryant used to say, you work in the dark so you can shine in the light, which I agree with. What I'm trying to teach people is a structure, that if you use this structure, and God forbid you are thrown out to the wolves where nobody told you. So I'll give you an example. So I was speaking at a school. I was in India. I was just touring schools, and I went to this one school, and the principal opens up the door. There's 5,000 kids in an auditorium. There's 20 newspapers, 5 TV stations there. And he says, oh, and for the next 1 hour, Dr. Brassell is going to teach us the 3 secrets to reading better. Mark, nobody's told me I'm speaking, and I have no such speech. Well, fortunately, it's India, so I can get away with speaking slower because English isn't necessarily their first language. So I look at the kids and I get excited. I'm like, kids, today I am going to teach you the 3 secrets to reading better. Who wants to learn the 3 secrets? And the kids are going crazy. And in my head, Mark, I'm like, what the heck are the 3 secrets to reading better? And using the structure that I share with people in my 2 days working with them, in 30 seconds, I created a presentation which now forms one of the companies that I have. And thank goodness that night, that speech went on the air to a 1.5 billion people in India. And it was a total game changer. And so, yeah, I always believe in practice. I mean, you're always going to do better with practice, but I mean, you mentioned one of my favorites. I love Gary Vee. Gary Vee, what I love about he does something which is very important. And so if I was going to give one word of it, I don't give advice. I give a strategy. One strategy for your audience on how to be a better speaker. It's exactly what Gary Vee does. Don't share your successes. Share your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you provide your own vulnerability. Brene Brown, she's a wonderful speaker. She talks a lot about vulnerability. She's from your neck of the woods, Houston. And the more you relate, I mean, I always make fun of personal development self-help gurus. I'm like, you ever notice that none of them ever grew up middle class? They all grew up in a garage or underneath a bridge, homeless. It's the same thing when a person runs for president. Yep. A person always was born in a log cabin, because you have to relate to your audience. And that's a great strategy. And Gary Vee, what I love about him, he's very authentic about that. I mean, it's difficult if he was on live television. You'd probably just hear one long beep the entire time, because every other word out of his mouth is an F-bomb. But he's very authentic, and he also understands his audience. I mean, Gary Vee is not speaking to churches. He's speaking to entrepreneurs and to people that want to make money. It's a different crowd. You need to understand that's the most important thing. I mean, like the 2 questions I always ask people to start our time together is, who is your audience and what is the problem that you solve? If you can answer both of those questions, you're in pretty good shape. And if you can't answer both of those questions, I'm telling you right now, you don't have a business.
I appreciate you saying that. And I do something different as a speaker. I've actually adopted the clean version of Gary Vaynerchuk speaking. So a lot of speakers don't like to do Q&A because it's the unknown. What are people going to ask? Once I learned that I can say, I don't know, made things a lot easier. So I do come prepared, but what I do is I try to get there early and I try to mull around and get the interest of what people are dealing with. Is it overwhelm? Is it social media? What is it? And then I'll tailor my presentation in the moment on that particular topic. And I may say, oh, who's that question? Don't be afraid to interrupt. And I know people have been speaking for 30, 40 years. They go, oh, I never do Q&A because you lose a sense of self-control. But I believe that the more you, who said it? Steve Harvey, one of my favorite quotes. In order for you to be successful, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And for me, I try to push myself into the area of uncomfortableness. And sometimes I fall flat in my face and sometimes I shine, but you are not going to grow if you stay comfortable. You have to get uncomfortable. You mentioned about, A-listers. I remember a couple of years ago on the podcast, I was going to go, you know what? I'm going to start getting A-listers. Not saying you're not an A-lister, Danny, but I was going to start looking for Mark Cubans and all these big people. And my audience says, no, for the same reason you just said. I can't relate to a Mark Cuban. I can't relate to an Oprah. I can't relate to a Tony Robbins. So from a host perspective, it sounds really good to get these big names, but your audience is going, how can I relate to Warren Buffett? And so now I try to get people who are like us. Now you're a little bit above us, but you are one of us. And but seriously, people want to hear about your failures because, like, I got fired from my job in 2005. I didn't start making any money until like 2020, and people start going, "That's 15 years." Like, no, you must have made like 50, 60 grand. No, I made about $2,000. And they're like, and they have this look on their face. They're like, I said, my wife supported me and her while I was trying to get the business off the ground. The reason why I didn't make any money is I didn't know what I was doing. So I was spending money that we didn't have on every coach, every course, every conference. They call it the 3 C's, ironically, the 3 C's. And I just realized that right now. But I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I needed. So I'm like, oh, here's some money for you. Like Oprah. Here's some money for you, and here's some money for you. And then so what happened was I had no money coming in. I was making all these coaches richer. Not their fault. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I shared that story. And when I shared that story on social media, I would get DMs going, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me. So I believe Pareto's principle is alive and well. I believe 80% of the people are trying to figure out what the heck's going on. 20% people do. 20% Gary Vaynerchuk, Patrick Bet-David, Robin Sharma, but most of us are in the 80%. Yeah, Would you agree with that?
I actually refuse to coach people that aren't willing to do the work. I mean, I have a 2-step process to my coaching is A, listen, and B, do it. And I actually hold people accountable. I call people up every 3 months to find out where they're at. And I love what you're talking about. I'm working with a guy right now, and he's ridiculous. I mean, I called him yesterday. He's on some Iditarod in the Antarctica right now. About a month ago, he was swimming with sharks in Madagascar. I'm like, dude, nobody can relate to you. You have like the craziest life I've ever heard, but everybody can relate to people that, are arguing with their spouse on, should the toilet paper go over or under? People understand that. Absolutely.
The great debate.
That's, you need to be relatable like that. That's why I've never been impressed by people that are trying to impress you. I like people that aren't trying to impress you, that speak like real. That's where Gary Vee's appeal comes from is, he's highly successful, but he talks about, he works. That guy works harder than anybody. I mean, I think there's actually 25 hours in his day and 8 days a week because I've never seen a person. It's like David Meltzer. David Meltzer's another one of these guys where every single day for like the last 4 years he's done either a podcast or a video thing. I mean, I'm like, how do you do that 7 days a week? That's amazing. He's very tuned in. But that's great. I mean, I worked with a guy, Jason, about 3 years ago, and I told him the same thing. I'm like, hey, if nothing else, go on Facebook Live. I want you practicing. And so he did it. The next day he went on Facebook Live, and some woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally watched him, and he stunk. And the second day he went on, and like 3 people when we're watching him, and he stunk, but he stunk a little bit less than the first time he did it. Well, 3 years later, 3 years later, Mark, he's got an audience of about 6,000 people. He didn't make seven figures last year, but he made high six figures. And it was because of consistency. I mean, your old podcast, I mean, you had like, I think you almost, I don't know if you did a full year, but you were doing it every single day for like 300 days in a row. I'm like, how does he do that? But it was something that caught my eye with you. I'm like, wow, this guy, he's committed. And that's how I knew you were going to be successful. It's the people that succeed are the people that do the work.
Well, just so if you've never listened to my podcast before, I didn't have another podcast. I renamed it from the Mark STRUCZEWSKI podcast, which no one could find, obviously, because how do you spell STRUCZEWSKI unless you're from Poland? And I just rebranded it in December 2022 to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. So if you go back and listen to episode number 1, it's going to refer to the Mark STRUCZEWSKI podcast, but the artwork will say the Mr. Productivity Podcast. So, but do you know how I started the podcast? Do you know why I started this podcast? In the spring of 2017, I happened to catch a video from Guess Who, Gary Vaynerchuk. He said, the future is voice and audio, and everyone needs to have a podcast. And I remember thinking to myself, I listen to podcasts. Can I have a podcast? And I went into Google and typed those fateful words. How do I start a podcast? Now, I used to be a radio DJ back in the day when they played records, 45, for those of you who are old enough to remember. And then we went to, digital. And I had my MacBook, and I had bought a microphone. And I remember the first episode, July 7th, 2017, which is 7-year anniversary coming up real soon. And I wasn't on camera. I was sweating. I was like, "Ooh, Lord, I'm so hot." And when that first episode dropped, I had about 25 downloads. And I remember thinking to myself, I know I downloaded it. I know my wife downloaded it. Who are these other 23 people? It blew my mind, because people want to be like Joe Rogan in podcasting. But if you get just 25 downloads for an episode, that's an entire classroom. I mean, think about that. We want the Joe Rogan numbers, but think about being able to talk to a classroom of 25 people. When a mentor told me that, I'm like, whoa, yeah, I would love to have the attention of 25 people. And so I never talk about my downloads anymore. I don't care, because it doesn't matter, because just because the podcast is downloaded doesn't mean A, it was listened to, B, it doesn't mean they're going to take action. So there's a long process for you to find the podcast, download it, listen to it, and actually take action. So, I mean, you talk about consistency. What I do video podcasts now. So this video will wind up on X. It'll wind up on my Facebook page and on YouTube. And the audio podcast will be everywhere else, because I don't know if people want to watch it or listen to it. And on my blog, on my website, there'll be a Claude AI will take the transcription. It'll make it into a blog post. I'll have the audio player, and I'll have the YouTube video there, because some people like to watch, some people like to read, some people like to listen. But there's something to be said about consistency. So when people ask me, how do you post every day on social media? Well, I have a secret weapon known as my wife. She's my video editor. I've got tons of video content. And all I have to, she schedules the stuff for Meta, X, and TikTok and YouTube. And then I manually do it on Threads and Snapchat. But just keep putting content out there, because you never know when that one person is going to see your video and go, oh my gosh, who is this guy? And all of a sudden you get a client. So I think there's something to be said, what you said about being consistent. And I don't mean being consistent for 2 weeks. I've been doing the podcast nearly 7 years. And you're right, good memory. In December of 2020, I had this lame brain idea that I'm going to be like Gary Vaynerchuk. I forgot the fact he had 15 people on his podcasting team. And so I'm going to go a podcast every day. And so I started doing interviews 5 days a week. Well, the problem is, if Danny said I'm sick or I lost the internet, now I have to stop what I'm doing to create an episode, because I said every day. I made it from Christmas Day 2020 until the second week of October of 2021, every single day. But I'll tell you this much, Danny, I got lazy, because if you had a microphone, you could talk about real estate, investing. I got lazy, and now I don't do that anymore. So I make sure that my guests, such as you, can actually help the audience. But I can't. Persistence is power. The one final thing I'll say about podcasting is, if you're going to think about starting a podcast, I'm here cheering you on. Don't get in it for the money. Get into it to serve people. You'll be better chance. You have a higher chance of success that way.
Completely agreed. I mean, in the consistency, you know who understands this? TV stations. You know, Seinfeld isn't on Thursday one day and then it's on Monday the next week. And one week it's 28 minutes and the next week it's 64 minutes. No, it's very consistent. The other thing that you were saying, which I completely agree with, I always tell people it doesn't matter how many people are in your audience. All that matters is who is in your audience. And the example I like to give was when I first started speaking, I was getting paid $700 a day to speak. And my local library asked me to do a free speech at the local library. And they said, oh, we'll have 500 people to come watch. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, 4 people showed up, Mark. 2 of them were my realtors, and the other 2 was a Hispanic couple that didn't speak a word of English. But I believe in giving 110%. And so I did as much in Spanish as I could. We had a lot of fun, enjoyed one another. Here's the teaching point. The Hispanic woman was taking English classes at the Adult Literacy Center. She recommended me to give a 45-minute keynote for $4,000. Which was 6 times my daily fee at that point. And that's when I learned, I once had a coach, Barbara Scher. I don't know if Barbara's still alive, but she's wonderful. But because of Barbara, now when I'm at a stoplight, I realize I'm surrounded by $1 million worth of vehicles. You have no idea the wealth around you at all times. I mean, if you only have one person listening to you, but it's Warren Buffett, that's a successful podcast. So,
Thank you.
I don't believe in this whole... I once spoke at Disney, and they said, oh, they're going to have 400 people. Well, 6 people showed up at Disney. And I gave 110%. But one of those 6 people was the assistant to Michael Eisner, the CEO of the company. And it taught me, doesn't matter how many, matters who.
Yep. That's why I tell people when they ask me how many downloads, well, if you're a prospective guest, you say how many downloads, I'm like, you just disqualified yourself, because that tells me you're not in this for the right reason. But I said, let's say I had a podcast, I had 4 downloads. You go, man, your podcast sucks. But if I told you it was Michael Eisner, Tony Robbins, Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, now it changes. But because we don't know who's listening, I don't care about the downloads. I don't care how many people follow me on social media. I never know who was watching me. I have people who are LinkedIn only. And I'm like, dude, if you don't think C-suite people are not on TikTok, they are. Okay, they are. They may not be using their CEO name, but they're on TikTok and they're on Meta and they're on YouTube and they're on X. And so when people tell me I'm only on a professional network, what does that even mean? That's why Gary, in his great book, Day Trading Attention, says he's all about where the attention is. So one day someone asked him, what if they ban TikTok? He goes, that attention is going to go someplace. So he didn't go, well, it's the wrong thing or that's a good thing. He just said that attention is going to go someplace. And I like the way he doesn't get into politics. He's all about attention. So Facebook's attention is come and gone, and now it's back again. Instagram is oversaturated. Now they're coming back. TikTok is trying these things. And that's why I think you have to be everywhere. I don't do trending videos on TikTok. I have like over 1,400 followers. It's just me giving productivity advice or sharing something about my life. That's all it is. You don't have to be crazy. You don't have to be a Mr. Beast. You can just share your story from your heart and get the right, like you said, one person. You never know who that one person is that's going to go, oh my gosh, who is this Danny guy? And all of a sudden you got a new client. So I think people are overthinking things.
I read Michael Caine's autobiography on acting was fantastic. And he was saying in the 60s, he was on set and one of the tour guides came with a tour group and everybody asked for Michael Caine's autograph. And Michael generously signed everybody and everything. And the tour guide was apologetic the entire time. Well, the tour guide was Michael Eisner, who became the CEO of Disney, and he never forgot. And so that's why I'm a big believer. You know, I tell this story. I'm a huge USC football fan. And one time I was in Heritage Hall and the coach at the time, Pete Carroll, he was walking and I'm like, hey, coach. And he looked straight at me and he totally blew me off. And that was actually one of the most important things ever to happen to me, Mark, because it taught me every encounter matters. He didn't know I was going to become a speaker and tell that story to over 100,000 people. The guy can be Mother Teresa. He'll always be a jerk to me because he treated me. But it taught me a very important lesson is treat the janitor the same way as the president. And, and it's the same 100%. Thing with what you're saying is your podcast is a success when I guarantee you there's at least one suicidal person listening to this right now. I mean, the COVID really screwed up a lot of people. I see it all over the place. We have no idea the psychological effect. Yeah. And if you can speak some encouragement into that person's psyche, you've succeeded. I mean, you're reading the Bible. I read the Bible, it's not called the book of words. It's called the book of acts. What can I do to make a difference to help other people? And that's what, when I hopefully meet God someday, he's not going to say, well said, Danny. He's going to say, well done.
Well, thank you for giving me another book to put on my list. The Michael Caine autobiography. It's another book I got to go out and put on my list.
You'll like this. There's another story in that book that was fantastic. He wasn't getting any roles. And so what he decided to do was to buy these really thick glasses. And all the casting agents started remembering. He didn't even need glasses. They're like, oh, who's that guy with the thick rimmed glasses? And I'm like, wow. That was, I was judging a speaking competition this year. And it was the second year of the speaking competition, and the first year was last year. And so I asked like 100 people, I'm like, oh, who were the 3 finalists? And they said, oh, there was that guy, there was that woman, and there was the cowboy. That's called a clue. Next time I'm speaking, I'm wearing a cowboy hat so people remember me.
Yeehaw. Well, I think it's funny. People miss a tremendous opportunity, because one of the things I like about Gary is he's so approachable. If you happen to see him walk on the streets of New York City or in the airport, you can walk up to him and say hi. He's not like, I'm better than you. Okay. He's very approachable. And when people meet him, can I get a selfie? Can I get an autograph? You've got a very smart man. Why don't you take 60 seconds and don't ask for anything? That's the mistake people make. Hey, can you be on my podcast? No. What is something I can do to serve you? Because 99% of the people are going to ask for something. They're going to ask for a selfie. They're going to ask for an autograph. Hey, can you do this? Ask the person, hey, what can I do for you, Gary? What can I do for you? And they're probably going to pause, because how many people ask that question? They're always asking something from the person. But if I ever do that, I want to say, hey, what can I do for you? I mean, can I comment on it? What can I do? And I think if people would stop asking for pictures, they're just another human being. At one time, Gary was nobody. Tony was nobody. Oprah was nobody. And I think we got to lead with a heart. We got to lead with giving. We got to lead with a sense of, let me serve you, instead of, hey, what can you give me? And it took me years to finally understand that.
Magic Johnson was talking about was when he was a rookie. This father with his son asked Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for an autograph, and Kareem told him, screw off. I don't have time for you. He used stronger language than that, and basically blew off the kid and his dad. And Magic goes up. He's like, well, I don't know if you'd like a rookie, but I would love to have my picture with you and sign whatever you need. And the father is like so happy. He's like, okay, yeah. And so he gets the picture, whatever. Well, Magic, when he was first starting to create Magic Johnson Enterprises, I mean, now he's a billionaire, by the way. But when he first started out, contrary to popular belief, ex-athletes, people don't like to do business with them. They think they want to get their pictures with them, but they don't care about giving them money. I mean, so Magic kept on asking banks for like $100 million, and they'd get their picture with them, and they're like, we're not giving you $100 million. And so he goes to this one guy, and he asks him for $100 million. And the guy's like, well, tell me more about what you're trying to do, Magic. And Magic explains it. He's like, nah, I can't give you $100 million. You need at least $500 million for that. Here's a check for $500 million. And Magic was like, he's like, oh my gosh, like, why are you doing this for me? And the guy opens up his desk and he takes out a picture, and it's him with his son with Magic.
No way. No way. Oh, wow.
Which again, wow. Magic didn't do it for that reason. Magic was I'm a huge Magic Johnson. I love Magic Johnson. But what I loved is, kindness counts. And, I'm a big believer in the universe rewards kindness.
Wow. There is this is not a political podcast, but one of my favorite people I like to watch is Dan Bongino. And he's got this thing he's talking about the political race for the presidential election. He said it's all about snapshots and sound bites. And that is so applicable to every area of life. snapshots and sound bites, because I'm very careful. I have to tell my wife this as well. Be careful what you say online, because this is my brand. I am the face of the Mr. Productivity brand. And if you say something like, I don't like this or I don't like that, the wrong people could take it the wrong way. Because life is, I mean, do you agree with that? Do you believe life is snapshots and sound bites?
I mean, I want to go deeper with people, but I definitely think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, people, this is why I like you, Mark. I don't even know you, but I do know you because I listen to your podcast, and I'm like, nobody can be not a jerk for that long and be a jerk. Like, you're not a jerk. You're a good guy. I'm like, oh, this is a guy I like. I mean, this is somebody I relate to. And that's what, I'm not into politics either. I've already actually solved the problem. The next election, we should all whoever the 8th phone caller is, that should be the president, the governor, the senator. And actually there's research to support this. If you read the old Greek Senate, that's what they did. It was like jury duty, and you were just sent there for 2 years to be in the Senate. And I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty smart idea, because you take away all the money involved in all this stuff, and it changes everything. Plus, I don't know. If you really want to, I mean, I worked with government for a while, and the reason I don't do that anymore is because there's just so much bureaucracy. It's the formula. It's bureaucracy. It's designed to be inefficient. And if you want to do something, just go out and do it, man. Like, I never coached people because I used to be a teacher, and I have a very high expectation. And when my students didn't meet that expectation, I was miserable. I was very depressed because I'm very hard on myself. And, COVID came around, and people were like, oh, Danny, how's your speaking business doing? I'm like, oh, it's great. You know how last night every single one of my speeches was immediately canceled because of a global pandemic. It's great being a speaker right now. And so I had to pivot. I had to make some extra income. I mean, there's a great quote by General Eric Shinseki. He's the first Asian American 4-star general. And he said, if you don't like change, you're going to like your relevance even less. And he's right. You got to pivot. And just like you did with Mr. Productivity, you're like, oh, people can't pronounce my last name. I mean, the way I got people to remember my last name, I'm like, oh, my name is Danny Brassell. My last name is really easy to remember how to spell. It's spelled like Brassell. No, I never took any grief over that as a child. And people will bump into me 20 years later, like, hey, Brassell, because they remember that. I gave them a visual on how to remember it. You got to. It's what's your pivot? And so I started coaching people, and I didn't think I was going to like it because I want people to succeed. But now I'm really enjoying it because my people are succeeding. They're like doing great things. And it's, that's where it's all, I mean, I get paid for it. That's wonderful. But it's even more wonderful when these people went from this to this high height. They're just succeeding beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, that's why you do it. I don't know. I mean, people are, yes, I'm motivated by income. I'm motivated by freedom. But really, my biggest motivation has always been impact. I want to make sure I actually made a positive difference in the world.
You said something earlier that has me convicted, because one of the things Gary Vaynerchuk's really big on is go live every day. And he goes, when you go live, stop teaching. This is one of his big things. He's all about document instead of create. He said, if you're creating the podcast, I'm not doing this now. But he said, I could do this. I may think about this after what you said. You set your camera up there. And of course, they can't hear your side of the conversation, which would be kind of weird. But sometimes he goes live all day in his office and it's on mute. But people just are voyeuristic. They just want to pop in. And when I used to go live on TikTok like every day, I'd get like 200-300 people showing up. I'd bounce in and out, obviously. But it's when you're live, it takes a certain person to go live, because you're like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing? What if my hair's not, well, not my case, but your hair's not looking good. Maybe you got a pimple on your face or your nose. And we start second guessing ourselves. But here's the thing. We think more of ourselves than most people do. And we're like not doing the thing because we're thinking about, what if someone thinks this? Well, probably they're not going to think of that anyways. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Is that not true?
One of the things I'm training people to do is stop selling, start serving. You're trying to teach too much. People don't remember. What people remember is, are you helpful? It's when I was a teacher, I've spent most of my career teaching in South Central Los Angeles in the Compton and Watts area, but I did teach in your neck of the woods. Yeah.
What subjects?
I always say from preschool all the way up to rocket scientist. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And but I did teach in your neck of the woods for a year. I taught third grade in Houston, Texas. And I know you're not supposed to have a favorite student. My favorite student of all time was a third grader named Howard. Howard was the son of a Baptist minister, and Howard's father spoke like Martin Luther King Jr., which meant Howard spoke like Martin Luther King Jr. And so one day I'm reading to the class this book called Stuart Little by this guy named E.B. White. Write it down. He's going to be big someday. E.B. White. So after I read a chapter, I always have the kids applaud the author. So one day the kids are applauding, and Deshaun's like, I like Stuart because he's little. And Howard stands up. He's like, don't you get it? Don't you get it? We all be little. We all be little. But we be big someday, like Mr. B. And he pointed at me, and I realized this child could lead a revolt. And Howard was the reason I became a teacher. I love his unbridled enthusiasm. It's what got me out of bed every single day. And I worried to death for Howard, because I knew next year he was going to get Miss Hampton as a teacher. And Miss Hampton was going to misinterpret Howard's enthusiasm as a discipline problem, because Miss Hampton is a direct descendant of Darth Vader. And Howard taught me one of the most valuable lessons anybody's ever taught me. Never give a person an answer. You're not doing them any favors. Give them a strategy. Because sooner or later, all of us are going to have a Miss Hampton to deal with. Have I prepared people on how to deal with that? That's what, when I'm working with people on speaking, I'm like, okay, let me throw some curveballs. What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if this happens? But the most important thing is, serve people. And it can be something basic. Like, I like to give everybody a short-term victory and a long-term victory. So a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a woman, and she's a clinical psychologist, works with people with depression. And I said, okay, here's what you can do. Tell the audience to take a pen and bite down on it. A lot of people don't know this, but the simple act of biting on a pen actually tricks your brain into thinking that you're smiling, and your brain actually produces the exact same number of endorphins as if you were actually smiling. And so it's been proven that you can actually trick yourself into happiness. Well, that's a way of serving your audience. I had a friend, one of my mentors, he used to teach parents how to get their kids to read aloud, how to read aloud to their kids. And he says in the middle of his speech, he's like, oh, wait a sec. Oh, I got something. This is going to save your life one day. If you ever lock yourself out of your car, but you have your cell phone, call up your spouse and have your spouse put your keys next to the phone, and then you put your phone next to the car door of your car. It'll actually unlock your car. Mark, I've tried this from 3,000 miles away. It works on not some of these newer cars, but the older cars, which is and I'm like, and it's fascinating. This has nothing to do with his speech whatsoever, but people for the next 20 years come up and they're like, hey, you helped me out so much. You have no idea that I was in this jam. But that's what most people aren't trying to be helpful. They're trying to sell something. If you actually just go from the service perspective, so I tell people, I'm just like you, Mark. I'm like, most people waste their time on social media on these things. But, I find that this is actually a useful teaching tool. So I'm a bad Christian. I'm always trying to learn different scriptures. And so, right now, every morning at 7:14, I've been practicing 2 Chronicles 7:14, which is, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Okay, good. I've gotten that. I saw the movie Dune. Yeah, I saw the movie Dune. I didn't like the movie, but I love the book, Dune. And there's a thing in Dune called the Litany Against Fear. So every day at 9/11, I've been practicing the Litany Against Fear, which is, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. And I haven't memorized it. I'm still working on that one. I got married on December 20th. So every day at 12:20, I have a reminder on my phone to tell my wife I love her. You see, what I'm doing is I'm taking this technology, and instead of wasting my time on it, I'm improving myself. I mean, actually listening to your podcast got me, I'm color coding things now. I'm making sure to devote specific times of the day to different things. That was all because of listening to Mr. Productivity. I'm like, oh, this is how I'm going to be more productive. Because productivity, people just think that means business. I'm like, no, productivity can be in your spiritual life, in your financial life, in your physical life, in your life of relationships with others, in your emotional well-being. I mean, you can be productive sitting there watching soccer all day and having a beer. It's helping your mental health. That's great. That's a great use of your time. And then that way you'll come back better. You know, I always tell teachers, I'm like, if you're having a bad week, please remember these 2 words: sick day. Take the day off. Go to the mall.
Yeah.
Try not to discipline other people's children while you're there. Go to a meal, watch a movie, read a book. What's going to happen is when you return to school, you'll be re-energized, and so will your students. I mean, and when I looked for a substitute, I was looking for the crankiest old hag, so the kids were begging to get me back, So, but all of us need those. That made me more productive. I mean, the reason I do podcasts is I get to practice. I get to meet all kinds of cool people. I mean, this is my second time with you, and I'm like, guys, Mark's a cool guy. I wish you and I, whenever I'm in Houston, I'm calling up Mark because we're going to have a beer and watch a game together because you're just fun. I'm like, I love what you're all about. That would have never happened if I hadn't put myself out there to be on podcasts. And this is what you did. I mean, I guarantee you, I've never heard your very first podcast, but I guarantee you it stunk. It's nothing where you are today.
It was actually titled "My Worst Podcast Ever." So I said in the podcast, I said, I can only go up, right? If I get worse than my worst podcast, I have a problem. But it was interesting you mentioned Disney, and you mentioned calling in sick. So back in the day, before Disney went woke, my mom and dad used to work for Disney. Used to work at Hollywood Studios. And back then, they didn't want you to be miserable. So you could actually call in unhappy or pissed off, because they didn't want you bringing that into Disney and being mean to the guests. Now, apparently, everything's out the window. But back then, my mom and dad, you could never frown if someone gave you a hard time. My mom and dad just tell me it's always smiles. You ought to be courteous. Now, I stopped going after my mom got real bad with Alzheimer's because it got bad. I mean, when they went woke, they just got bad. There's very few smiles. And I know Michael Eisner, he's got a problem now because they're losing billions of dollars, but 50% of their staff wants it one way, and he's going to have to make some tough choices because all the movies that are coming out are skewed a certain way. I'll leave it that way to keep this podcast without being banned on too many websites. But you know where I'm going with this. But they're not making money, losing billions of dollars. But I don't know how he's going to fix it because he's going to be involved ripping up the band. In my opinion, I'm not. Yeah, it was. I'm not a CEO.
When Bob Iger took over for Michael Eisner, the first call he made was to Steve Jobs to buy Pixar because Michael Eisner and Bob Iger were both at the Hong Kong Disney, and they're watching the parade. And Bob Iger made the observation: "Is like, all the characters in this parade from the last 10 years are from Pixar movies. We're screwed if we don't get Pixar." And that's why they got Pixar, which I thought that was fascinating. I mean, and don't worry about, if you want a great Disney, I've been to Tokyo Disney several times. It's so clean. It's half the price of American Disney. And the best part, Mark, is they go on the lame rides. Like Small World has like a 3-hour wait and you can walk right onto Space Mountain. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest time ever. So, and I love Disney. I absolutely love Disney. But again, it's kind of like the same thing in politics when people are like, oh, everything's going down the toilet. I'm like, but somebody emerges. There's always somebody that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
If you look at history,
100%.
Like when people think, over 100 years ago, 1893, there was this huge environmental catastrophe. It was because horses were pooping so much on the streets and peeing on the streets. It was creating all kinds of methane problems and environmental catastrophe. And so they had this environmental conference. Horses would die on the streets. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so they had an environmental conference to try and figure out how do we solve the problem. And they couldn't figure it out. And then one man solved the problem. His name was Henry Ford. And he created the automobile.
Wow.
And I'm like, and I'm convinced there's a person today, right now, with all the problems happening. I'm convinced. And it could be like, and this is what I love about like this. You and I can be in totally different places, but we're connected electronically. Right now, there's some barefoot kid on a dirt floor in Cambodia. Maybe he hasn't had breakfast today, but if that kid has an internet connection and a laptop, that kid has the exact same access as the head of Google. The world just got a whole lot smaller, and you don't have to be born in New York City anymore. There's all kinds of, I get excited when I think, I'm sorry, I'm getting really excited right now because I'm like, there's amazing possibilities.
No, I love the energy. Hey, listen, I identify as Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, so I'm glad you matched I match my my energy here, but you're absolutely right. So when people, when I went that long period of not making any money, people go, "Why are you still doing this? Why don't you go get a real job?" I remember Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, 3 feet from gold. And if you don't know the story, it's a story that he tells in the book where this guy, this is back in the gold rush days. He was in the East Coast. He sold a lot of stuff, went west, started digging, and he got some little gold here, little gold here. Then he hit the mother lode. He hit the vein. So he started harvesting all this gold, and all of a sudden it stopped. And he kept digging and digging and digging, nothing. So he eventually sold his equipment, went back east. He sold it to somebody who knew the land. He was 3 feet from gold. He stopped, and that's what keeps me going. So when sometimes I go months not getting any income. I don't stop because I think I love roller coasters. I feel my wife and it's really God's company. We just work for him. But we're almost at the top of the most exciting roller coaster we've ever been on. And we're almost to the apex of that hill. And if I quit now, I don't want to go into heaven and have God go, "Oh, dude, you were," not that God would say, "Dude," but I don't want God to say, "Dude, you were maybe the angels would call me dude. You were so close. Why did you give up?" And the thing is, we don't know if it's going to be the next hour, the next day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter, the next year. Don't stop. Now, do what you have to do. Go get a second job, get a side hustle, whatever, to pay your bills for your family. But don't give up. If you feel that fire in you, don't stop, because you are stealing the gift you have for the world. I believe no one's here by accident. Everyone is here for a reason, and everyone's got a gift they're supposed to share with the world. And if you give up, you are depriving us of your special gift. Do you agree with that?
As a thank you to you and your audience, I wanted to give you guys a couple of gifts today. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, again, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give everybody a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This is a book I wrote for an elementary school principal who was trying to keep his faculty and staff positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. So every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation, demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. Also, I'm going to give everybody access to a 5-day reading challenge I did last summer for about 700 parents around the world, where every day for an hour, I give you all kinds of strategies to get your kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, love reading, because the way we need to get kids excited about reading, the more excited we get kids about reading, the more likely they are to read. And the more you read, the better you can get. You can get all that at freegiftfromdanny.com. And I just wanted to thank you again, Mark, for having me. I just love your energy. I love what you're doing. You are making a positive difference, and keep on doing it.
Well, thank you so much, Danny. And freegiftfromdanny.com and MrProductivity.com. 2 easy URLs to remember. And we'll catch you on the next episode.